I don't usually spend time on spicy websites, but one July evening a few months ago, I joined up for their premium membership in addition to looking at the content. I concluded that the $100 was well spent. I was watching a live feed of a really attractive, muscular man slamming a very hot woman from behind. Though I've seen better, there was something about this scene that really struck a chord with me. The woman, referred to as Hot Housewife Jen, I knew her real name was Kelly, was letting out a loud moan while being touched by an unidentified attractive man. Her expression of lust on her face told me she was having a great time. I had seen that lust many times before. My suspicion was confirmed as I watched, and she released it, trembling and screaming with the powerful pleasure she was experiencing. She was engaging in what nature intended, that is, having hot sex and getting the most pleasure, so calling the website Nature's Pleasure Spa made sense. When Kelly rolled over on the bed, looking totally satisfied, he grinned and said, "Well, darling, that was pretty damned good. I bet your old man never makes you climax that good, does he, Hot Housewife Jenna?" Kelly grinned back at him and said, without hesitation, "Well, Mario, that was pretty damned good for sure, as you say. But just so you know, no one lights me up like my husband. I have been with a few men, but no one ever makes me happy like he does. You are good, but he is fantastic, so don't quit trying harder." She gave him another smile. Mario looked at her with a confused expression and inquired, "Well, if he is so fantastic, why are you cheating on him by coming here and letting me do you?" She responded with a grin on her face, "I didn't plan for it to happen, but I like to have sex, and I am glad you service me. I also do it because I can get away with it, and he will never know. I actually love my husband with all my heart, and after 3 nights here, I realize how much better he is than what I get here. It makes me love him and appreciate him all the more. Since I was able to see what was going on with my loving wife for a lot less than what surveillance equipment or private investigators would have cost me, the $100 was money well spent." She laughed and said, "Actually, I probably am doing him a favor by coming here and doing this. So, get over here and drill me some more. You were undoubtedly wondering how I got here and what had happened earlier that evening to compel me to visit this location. It's a fair question, and I suppose the most truthful response would be that it was a fluke, a unique instance of good luck that came my way. It was fortunate for me that I discovered my spouse was unfaithful to me, rather than that she was deceiving Mario. I've been married to Kelly for a little over 8 years. When we were in elementary school together, that's when we first met. We were raised in the central Illinois countryside near a small town. I lived in the country, she lived in the city. Both her father and my father owned the biggest grain farms and grain elevators in the region. It was only natural for us to meet, attend the same school, and become friends because our parents worked together in business. I won't bore you with the grade school crushes, the high school romance, or even the college scene. Yes, we dated and shared beds with other people. Though we hadn't been in a relationship, I believe we had always known in our hearts that we ought to be together. Yes, I did steal her virginity, that much is true. However, there were others for her and me along the way. We made the decision to separate during our junior year at the University of Illinois, and I eventually proposed to her. We got married a week after we graduated, which was about a year and a half later. We both graduated with business administration degrees. Up until that July night, at least I thought life was good. All right, let me go on. Kelly's parents retired and relocated to Phoenix, Arizona, 3 years ago. Tom Sr. sold a 48% stake in the grain company to Kelly, her sister Amber, and her 2 brothers, Tom and Carl. He wanted to retain controlling interest for a few years to add his financial backing to their growth. He would eventually start to lose interest until they were the sole owners. My friend Walter Swanson, popularly known as Wall-E, is married to Amber. Swanson is a grain farmer. His farm is only a few hundred acres smaller than my farm. We enjoy spending time with them and are fairly close in proximity to each other. Carl and Tom share management of the grain company, and Kelly serves as their bookkeeper and controller. Amber handles customer relations and handles grain sales transactions at the facility where she works as well. With a small number of additional workers, primarily truck drivers and grain handlers, it is a true family-run company. They also have a few part-timers on staff during the busiest part of harvest season. I suppose that provides enough background, so I should go on to the detailed account of how I found out my wife was deceiving another man on the internet and what transpired after. It had taken all four of the Gentry children a great deal of extra time to arrange the purchase of their father's interest in the grain company. Although I didn't have a lot of involvement, I was aware that they needed to work hard to close the deal. Meetings with banks, the Illinois Department of Agriculture, and insurers all took place. After the deal was completed, they were all exhausted. Luckily, all of this happened in the winter, when business was at its slowest. I didn't need Kelly on the farm as much as I would have during my two busiest times of the year because it was after harvest. Kelly did not perform any farm work herself. However, since I managed 2,200 acres of corn and soybeans, she was very busy during those times, so I needed her to help me with errands and other tasks. You get the idea. The girls, Kelly and Amber, decided they wanted to take a few days off and visit a spa to decompress because we weren't too busy. They reserved a 3-night stay at Princess Spas, a fittingly named spa. It's true that I mentioned Nature's Pleasure Spa, but that was the website's name. Princess Spas was the spa's actual name. The girls decided to repeat it that July, long after the planning season had ended, because they had returned feeling so refreshed and at ease. They reserved another weekend for the following year. I was watching the video on the internet that weekend while I was at the spa. So how did I ever come across it? On one of his regular tours of his territory, our county's Illinois Department of Agriculture field agent, Dan Marvel, just so happened to drop by. Dan inquired about Kelly, since Kelly and I had known each other in college. I mentioned that she was at Princess Spas for a getaway. Dan gave me a strange look and suggested that I might be interested in checking out something amusing that was going on there. He said that a cousin of his had been a masseuse at that spa and had told him some pretty wild stories about what went on there. He mentioned that they even had a different name for their website. Though he couldn't remember the name exactly, he assumed it had to do with pleasures. When I asked him what he was talking about, he hesitantly replied that I should look into it, but that he didn't really want to get into it. You may not know me, but I play poker online. I browse the internet for interesting content and occasionally visit adult websites, but mostly I just find interesting stuff. I decided to look around that evening and discovered Nature's Pleasure Spa. Finding the live feed was easy, and the game was underway in no time. I can tell you everything that transpired that evening, but why? You are aware of what took place. I felt wounded. I sobbed. I shouted. I became irate. I became melancholy. And when I discovered that his wife had cheated on him, I received everything else a man could ask for. Because Nature's Pleasure Spa had an archive folder, I was able to find videos of the 2 previous visits in addition to the 2 previous nights Kelly and Amber had spent there, so I quickly discovered that it wasn't the first time she had cheated either. For an extra $20 apiece, I was able to download every video with the premium membership. 3 of the videos from their second visit, 3 from their current trip, and 2 from their first visit were downloaded. I spent $160 downloading 8 videos in total. I therefore had all the proof I would ever need to file for divorce from my wife for a total of $260. I just didn't know how I was going to do it yet, but I knew I had to get started immediately. I wouldn't wait to make it happen for a week, 2 weeks, or even a month. I personally believed that it would be best if we parted ways as soon as possible. I had video evidence that she had cheated on another man at least 8 times. In actuality, she had cheated on the videos I had downloaded on at least 2 different men, Mario and Steve. I didn't even care if there had been more because I didn't know. It was more than enough, 2 men and 8 times. I burned some DVD copies of the videos and stored them in a very secure location. Upon building the house, my father installed a wall safe that was accessed through a concealed panel within the office's built-in bookcase. I removed all references to Nature's Pleasure Spa from my computer as well as all original files, aside from the DVD copies, as soon as the copies were securely stored away. The trail leading to the evidence I had vanished. Once I had finished all of that, I picked up my phone and texted Kelly. Kelly, this is Jack. I happen to know exactly what you were doing at Princess Spas, and I have evidence to back it up. Don't bother to come back to the house if you decide to return here at all. This house is no longer your home, and soon I will no longer be your husband. When we're finished, my lawyer will be in touch with you in the next few days. Arrangements can be made at that time for you to come and pick up your personal possessions. I never heard from Kelly that night, so it seems like she had turned off her phone and didn't receive my text until the following morning. However, my phone began to ring early the following day. I didn't answer because I could tell by caller ID that it was Kelly. Before long, I heard her voicemailing me. Jack, what in the world are you talking about, honey? I have no idea what is going on there, but why on earth would you text me such awful stuff? Amber and I are packing up now, and I will be home in a couple of hours. I don't know what you think I did, but you're wrong. I will see you when I get there, and then we can talk. I love you, Jack. My cell phone rang again shortly after, and this time, I didn't answer it, rather, I let it go to voicemail. Almost to the word, the message was the same. I pondered whether she had jotted down her planned remarks. It wasn't long before I received the text after refusing that call. She was almost exactly the same as she had been in the 2 phone messages, almost like a broken record. I chose not to speak with her, but rather to let her know that I received her messages by sending a brief text reply. This way, I avoided having to have a conversation with her. I just texted her, I wonder if Mario would have any idea about what you're talking about, honey, if I asked him. Why don't you have him call me, and I will ask him what I said about not coming back to the house. I mean, do not think you can come home. You cannot. It is over, Kelly. Later that afternoon, I received another phone call from Kelly, but no more texts. She texted me, Jack, we need to talk. I am staying with Amber until you and I talk and put this awful misunderstanding behind us. Please call my cell phone and talk to me. I did not pick up the phone when I got home that Sunday afternoon. I went to my bank the following morning and made arrangements for a second safe deposit box in my name alone. I sealed the box with the original prenuptial agreement and 1 copy of the DVDs. I had duplicated the prenuptial agreement because I had scheduled a meeting with my attorney for 11 a.m. I was certain he had one, but I didn't want to risk there being an issue. Kelly was seated in my lawyer's office when I arrived at the scheduled time. When I walked in, she looked up at me, and I could see that she looked terrible. It was obvious that she had been crying, her hair was unkempt, and she had not had much sleep because there were dark circles under her eyes. That was how she always felt when she was too tired. Kelly, I responded, we have to talk about this. How did you know I was going to be coming here, she said. When you scheduled the meeting, Richard gave me a call, Kelly answered. My lawyer, Richard Warner, entered the reception area at that point and asked the 2 of us to come into his office. No, Richard, we will not be going into your office together. You have broken my trust by calling Kelly, and I need a straight answer from you right now. Are you going to represent me, only me? I said, my anger simmering beneath the surface. You know lawyers are supposed to be so damn smart, I went on, but this guy must have gotten shortchanged in the distribution of brains because he said, no, Jack, if this continues, I will be representing Kelly. It turns out he thought that the grain business was a better client for him than my farm business. It actually may have been because besides the grain business, he had all of the Gentry family members too. I had my opinion on that issue and felt that he would eventually realize the error of his thinking. Fine, Richard, please have all of my original documents in your possession and all copies of contracts and other paperwork of mine that you have available to me at 4 p.m. today. I will either stop in to pick them up or have a courier drop by to pick them up. I just want you to know that I have appreciated the work you have done for me in the past, but you are making a big mistake here. Richard, I will be seeking legal services elsewhere, and my new attorney will be contacting you as soon as possible. Jack, why won't you talk to me now to clear this up, was the pleading question Kelly asked after remaining silent the entire time. Because, Kelly, it is obvious that Richard values you greater as a client than he values me, and I will not be having this conversation with you without legal representation. And I wouldn't trust him, I continued. Richard said, Jack, you know I have always been straight with you, so you have nothing at all to fear. Oh, Richard, I have lots to fear. You cannot serve two masters, so they say, and it is clear whom you have chosen to be the master in this. Besides, you have already proven you can't be trusted when you called Kelly in here. Goodbye, my attorney will be in touch. I heard Kelly start crying once more as soon as I left the room. I needed to find a new lawyer now. I was aware of David Warner's exceptional legal skills and his fierce rivalry with Richard Warner. That seemed like a wise decision, but I wouldn't jump in without doing some research. You get into bed with people like bankers, insurance agents, accountants, and attorneys, so you better know what you have before you pull back the covers. I came to understand that privileged information is almost always involved in attorney-client relationships, which makes them extremely important. I called the law office and inquired about a list of references because I knew a few people who had worked with David. The secretary happily agreed to email me the list, stating that they did indeed have one. I chose to visit 3 of my friends who were on the list to ask their thoughts on David's work. I had 4 friends on the list. It didn't take long at all because all 3 of them gave me a very positive recommendation for David right away. I had no doubt about his ability to work well for me. Since Wally is married to Kelly's sister Amber, I didn't go see the 4th friend because I didn't want to involve him. I gave David's office another ring. I introduced myself, asking if I could schedule a visit with him after 4 p.m. He was busy until 4:30 p.m., the receptionist informed me, but she would check with him to see if he could see me after that. I had to try even though I knew there was a possibility he wouldn't see me. Upon her return to the call, she informed me that although Mr. Warner would see me at 4:30 p.m., it would only be for a brief meeting because of his other commitments that evening. I informed her that I would arrive there just before 4:30 p.m. after agreeing to that. Then she continued, by the way, my name is Samantha. I am David's wife. I look forward to seeing you at that time. When I went to Richard's office at 4 p.m. to pick up my paperwork, they hadn't had it all copied. They had clearly been waiting for me to decide otherwise by stalling. I must admit that I lost it on them pretty quickly. I threatened to call my new attorney if I didn't get all of my legal documents in the next 15 minutes. When they asked me who that might be, I replied that they would soon enough find out. After that, the office was quite busy. They were copying, I believe, 3 sheets at a time, and 20 minutes later I had them all. I didn't let my tardiness about missing my deadline get to me anymore because I still had time to get to David's office by my appointment time. After our meeting, David decided to represent me both personally and professionally. He agreed to store all of the paperwork I had obtained in his vault until we had time to go over it all together when I asked if I could leave it there for safekeeping. We scheduled a meeting for Tuesday, the following day, at 9 a.m. to review all of the documentation and create a divorce schedule. Well, Samantha, am I in trouble, or are your evening plans still okay? I asked her as I was leaving the office at 5:30 p.m. She smiled back at me and said, "You did just fine, Mr. Hagen. Our evening will go just as planned. I wish all of our clients were as prompt as you have been. But please call me Sam from here on." "Thank you, Sam. And you, please call me Jack." We went over all of my business contracts and paperwork the following morning. But you know, attorney-client privilege and all that means I can't talk about it here. However, I can tell you that David believed that, from a business standpoint, everything appeared to be in order. David and Sam invited me to join them at the neighborhood diner when we took a break for lunch. Since I wanted to visit my bank before we continued in the afternoon, I agreed and met them there. We had a great lunch together, and they were a very nice couple. They were both a few years ahead of me in school, I discovered. Although they weren't close, David had claimed that he and Tom Gentry were in the same grade. They were probably too competitive with one another. They had 2 daughters, ages 3 and 6, and had been married for roughly 10 years, I discovered. The 2 little ones looked very pretty in the pictures they showed me. They also adopted their mother's traits. Like Sam, I could see that they both had lovely smiles. I believe that lunch was a huge benefit to me. The downside of the lunch was that I realized my life partner was no longer with me, but it also made the transition into my new attorney relationship much easier. The way David and Sam were together was very similar to how Kelly and I had gotten along before I found out about her infidelity. I know my eyes missed it up a few times, but it just made me sad. Sam had noticed and had a worried expression on her face, but David was oblivious to everything. After lunch, I stopped at the bank and made a few changes to protect my assets. I also picked up a $5,000 check payable to David Warner Law Offices. It would be a retainer for the work they would do for me in the near future. David hadn't asked for anything yet, but I knew he would appreciate the effort. I arrived back at the office at 1:30 p.m. to resume our meeting. Sam told me that David was on the phone, and she took me to the small conference room we had been meeting in. She asked me if I wanted any coffee or anything else, and I told her no, that I was fine. She sat down beside me in one of the chairs and reached out her hand to me. David didn't tell me what's going on, Jack, but I can guess what this afternoon is going to be about based on your reactions at lunch, Sam said. I see you are wearing a wedding ring, so I am guessing it has to do with your wife. If you will allow me, I am going to ask David to let me sit in here with you this afternoon while we deal with whatever you have to tell us. I was on the verge of breaking down again, so I just nodded my agreement. My anger had waned for the time being, and I guess the emotions of the lunch were stronger now. It would be good to have a woman close by with the sensitivity they have. I realized I just might need the sympathetic presence of having Sam there in the afternoon meeting. I told the entire story about discovering Kelly's cheating. I broke down a couple of times, and Sam stepped in to sympathize and comfort me. Once I regained control of my emotions, I informed them of my intentions. Unless something comes out to change my mind, I plan to file for divorce and to enforce the terms of the prenuptial agreement. David and I reviewed the prenuptial agreement in detail. The terms are pretty much as follows: I keep 100% of all farm assets, real estate, and personal property. Kelly keeps 100% of grain business assets. Kelly gets 50% of our financial assets if there has been no infidelity. If there has been infidelity, Kelly only gets $25,000 for each year if she has been unfaithful, not 50%. Jack only gets $25,000 for each year if he has been unfaithful, not 50%. Household personal property is split 50% regardless of the circumstances. Jack, I need you to show me the proof of infidelity, David asked. No, David, I have the proof, but I will not show it to you now or to anyone else for that matter unless we are forced to go to court over this. Then I will show it to the judge, I replied. David insisted, Jack, I need to see it to be sure we have a case of infidelity. I need to be sure. David, you need to trust me. I have the proof, but I loved Kelly, and I don't want anyone seeing what I have seen unless it is absolutely necessary, I insisted. Sam touched David on the arm and nodded her head yes. David reluctantly agreed. During the next couple of days, Kelly called me several times and left me messages. I never took her calls and deleted the messages without listening to them. David called me and said, we have set a Thursday meeting with you, me, Kelly, and Richard on Thursday at 10:30 a.m. David and I drove over to Richard's office to meet with him and Kelly. When we arrived, I saw that Kelly's car was already in the parking lot, so we went into the office. Richard's receptionist ushered us back to a small conference room where we waited only a couple of minutes before Richard and Kelly came in. Kelly looked a lot better than she had when I saw her at Richard's office earlier in the week. Obviously, she had fixed herself up for the meeting because she was, in fact, beautiful. I did everything I could do to keep my feelings hidden because I didn't want her to see how my heart ached for her. She smiled at me and said, Jack, I hope we can finally talk and get this misunderstanding behind us. I miss you and want to come home. I didn't respond to her because I felt my voice would crack if I said anything at the moment. I needed to get my emotions under control. It wouldn't be easy, but I had to do it. David spoke up, we are here to discuss the divorce proceedings for the dissolution of Jack and Kelly's marriage. I believe we should open up the discussion, giving each party time to express their thoughts and opinions about how this young couple goes forward in their lives. Richard was nodding and interjected, "My client feels this is a total misunderstanding and welcomes the opportunity to clear the air and talk to her husband." I had been having a hard time controlling my emotions, but Richard did me a big favor. He ignited the anger in me again, and right now, it was at the boiling point. I knew I could control the anger, and that made it simple to also control my emotions, my hurt, and disappointment in Kelly. "I would be okay." I said, "That is fine with me, Richard." "Your client can talk to her husband," I stated. I looked across the table at Kelly and said, "Kelly, here are some facts. When we married, we signed a prenuptial agreement, and we modified it 2 years ago when you bought into your father's business. I have brought along copies of the modified agreement for all parties to have." Kelly looked on in a bit of shock. She quietly said, "But Jack, I don't want a divorce. I want to be your wife. Why can't we just get past this misunderstanding and go home and be happy again?" I pretty much glazed over that comment and continued, "Our intention was to protect individual interests while still reaping the benefits of our marriage. Originally, the prenuptial agreement was to protect assets held in my family over several generations. Then, when you bought into your father's business, it was to also protect the same assets long held in your family in the event of a divorce. Our agreement clearly spells out that I will retain 100% of the assets from my family, and you will retain 100% of the assets from your family. All debt pertaining to those business assets will accrue to the business, and the other party will have no responsibility. Because we jointly work to provide our marital assets, our agreement calls for certain monetary and property splits depending on the circumstances of our divorce. As this document clearly shows, you are entitled to all of your personal items, including clothing, jewelry, your car, and other items that a man would have no interest in. Likewise, I have the same entitlement on my side. All other non-farm personal property, such as furniture, artwork, electronics, etc., is to be split 50/50ths. Farm personal property, such as grain bins and machinery and equipment, etc., is to remain 100% mine as it is an integral part of the farming operation. The monetary distribution to you in the event of a divorce is 50% of financial assets if there has been no infidelity. There are 2 exceptions to that distribution in the event of infidelity, as you can see in the document. In the event that you divorce me for infidelity, the distribution would be that I get only $25,000 per year or $200,000, not 50%. In the event that I divorce you for infidelity, the distribution would be $25,000 per year or $200,000 total, not 50%. I'm going to ask you some questions, Kelly. How you answer the questions will determine whether I pursue the divorce and on what grounds. Obviously, that will also then determine the outcome of any monetary distributions. If our marriage is going to have any chance to survive, Kelly, you must answer each question with perfect honesty. If you refuse to answer or I catch you in any lie, it is over. Is that understood? Are you willing to do that to have a chance to save our marriage?" Kelly had been sitting there looking totally stunned by my recitation of our prenuptial agreement. She quickly snapped out of it and responded, "Yes, Jack, I will answer your questions, and I will answer them honestly. I love you, and I want our marriage to survive. I will do anything to get you to stop this and allow me to come back home. Kelly, I would like to tape record these questions. Is that acceptable to you?" This time she hesitated a bit and turned to Richard, who had pretty much remained silent up until this point. Richard, being a typical lawyer, said, "Kelly, I would advise against that, but you do what you feel is important to you." With that, my lawyer, David, piped up, "Well, Kelly, I agree with Richard and would advise you, or my client, to not tape this, but it is Jack that has to be convinced, you're not Richard or I, so do what you feel is right." Kelly said, "I will do anything to get past this misunderstanding, so yes, go ahead and tape this. I am okay with taping any conversation between Jack and me." David and I had brought along a tape recorder, so we put it on the table where all voices would be picked up by the microphones. "Kelly, what are your questions?" I asked. "Jack, I want to ask you if you have been faithful to me, but I want to ask it in 3 different time periods. The first time period is from the day we pledged to be exclusive with one another up until the day we were engaged. Were you faithful to me during that time period? Kelly asked, smiling. Yes, Jack, I was faithful to you during that time period, she replied. Well, that is lie number 1. You couldn't even answer the very first question honestly. I should get up and walk out right now, but I won't yet. Are you telling me you didn't have sex with Larry Evendale 2 days after we pledged exclusivity? Is that what you were telling me? Larry was that kind of guy, Kelly. He had to brag, and he, in fact, bragged to me that you invited him over to your house on a Tuesday night when your parents were going to be gone, and he screwed you silly on your own bed. Oh, and Kelly, he told me he didn't use a condom either. He grinned at me and said, revenge is a lot more fun when you are a 304. His parting shot at me before he walked away was, Jack, she really loved it, and I am certain that I will get lots of repeat performances in the future, probably even after you marry the 304. Now, you probably could say he made it all up, but strange as it seems, Amber was nearby and happened to overhear it all. She walked over to me after Larry left and said, Jack, Kelly loves you, and she won't cheat on you again. She was just giving him a farewell sex. Please don't do anything stupid. And by the way, he lied, he did use condoms. I saw the packages in the trash the next morning. So, you see, Kelly, you have already lied to me, but I can understand what you did, even if I hated it. I am going to give you a pass on this lie, but there will be no more passes from here on. Tell me the truth or suffer the consequences. After that event, I didn't trust you, so I watched you like a hawk for the next 6 months. For that entire 6 months, you did nothing to arouse suspicions in me, so I asked you to marry me and gave you the ring you have on your finger. For the time being, I knew you were probably hoping that would come quicker, but I wasn't ready to trust you yet, so you had to wait. Question number 2. During our engagement, from the day you got the ring until our wedding day, did you cheat on me, Kelly? She never hesitated a second as she said, no, absolutely not. I knew what that answer was going to be because I said, well, I know that is true because, you see, I still didn't trust you totally. So, I continued to observe you for that entire year until I felt I could trust you. I was almost certain you were faithful to me during that time. Richard, to his credit, asked if we could take a break. He wanted to confer with his client and give her time to regroup. He had noticed, like me, that during my tirade about Larry Evendale, Kelly had gotten very emotional and was on the verge of breaking down. He wanted to give her a chance to compose herself before we continued. We, in fact, took a break for lunch, and David and I drove by his office and picked up Sam and went to the local diner for the Blue Plate special. Sam asked, how is it going? And David said, I think Jack is doing fine. There hasn't been much come out yet, but he laid the groundwork for an honest answer for the marital period. If she admits all of it, he may still want to pursue the divorce, but he also may see that she truly wants to preserve her marriage. It will be a tough call, but I think he will be able to make it. Of course, if she lies, then Jack has to decide where to go from there. Sam looked over at me, and her woman's intuition kicked in, and I knew she saw my pain. I gave a weak smile and said, this is not an easy thing at all. Why on earth do people do such stupid things and cause so much pain in their own lives and in the lives of those who they love? She reached her hand over on top of mine and said, if we only knew, Jack, we could slap them before they could be so stupid. Of course, that got me to laugh, as did David. Even in this difficult time, I could laugh. I guess that is a testament to the resiliency of humanity. People grieve at funerals, but they also laugh. I guess people grieve at divorces, but can also laugh too. I smiled at Sam and said, thanks, Sam. I really needed that. She just nodded. Shortly after 1 p.m., we returned to Richard's office to continue the meeting with Kelly. Before I asked the next question, I reminded Kelly, you need to answer these questions with total honesty. If you lie in any way, it will be the end of this meeting and no hope at all for our marriage. Do you understand this? Kelly said, yes, I understand, and I will tell you the truth. Kelly, from the day we were married until this very moment, did you ever cheat on me? I saw the tears well up in her eyes, and I felt so badly for her because I knew how painful it must be for her. But I couldn't comfort her or let her off the hook. I needed so badly for her to care enough about our marriage that she would confess everything. I didn't know if I could stop this divorce or not. If she told me the total truth, I would know. However, if she told the total truth, she cared enough to try to save our marriage. Yes, Jack, I did cheat on you, she responded. She dropped her head down onto her crossed arms on the table and just sobbed. I am so sorry, Jack. Can you ever forgive me? I asked that Richard and David leave the room because I had a few more questions for Kelly, and I didn't want to embarrass her in front of those other men. They both objected, but I insisted that David leave, and Kelly nodded to Richard that she wanted him to leave also. I had her confession that she had cheated on me on tape. It would be all I needed in a divorce hearing, and I didn't want the rest of my questions and her answers on tape, so I turned it off. Kelly, answer these questions: when, where, who, and why? She sniffled a few times. Oh, Jack, I am so sorry it happened. This weekend at Princess Spa, one of the masseurs named Mario is who I cheated with. I don't know exactly why it happened, Jack. I guess just passions of the moment would be the best way to describe the why. Amber and I had been enjoying the day so much, and after a wonderful dinner, we each decided on getting a massage before we went to bed. My masseur was Mario. I was on the massage table in the room, lying on my stomach. Mario started the massage, and it felt so good. His hands were soft and yet strong. He worked the muscles in my arms and my shoulders and back. He worked from my feet up my legs. He even worked my inner thighs, but stopped short of becoming too intimate, if you know what I mean. Then he started working on my back and shoulders again, as I was still tense in those areas. I felt him untie my bikini top and pull the sides down. I have to confess it felt great, and I did nothing to stop him. At that moment, I had no idea I would get in over my head. With that, she started to cry again. Oh, Jack, if I could go back, I never would have allowed it, and we wouldn't be where we are now. You have to believe me. Even though it was killing me to hear all this, I wanted to hear the story she was telling. Not out of lust or a desire to get turned on, but because I wanted to know what she would tell me. Go on, Kelly, tell me the rest. There is nothing else to elaborate, Jack. We just had sex. She sat there for a moment, hoping she would go on, but she didn't say another word and just sat there with her head down, sniffling. Finally, she raised her head up and looked at me with a questioning look. Jack, is there any hope that you will forgive me? I didn't want to make it sound like we were in court, but in fact, we kind of were, so I asked her, Kelly, is this the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? She looked at me with what I would describe as a weird look. It was a look of wonderment. It was a look that had a question, but no way to ask it. It was kind of an I wonder how much he knows look. Finally, she said, yes, Jack, that is what happened. I am so sorry. At that moment, my heart was breaking, and against all odds, I was able to hide both the pain of her betrayal and the anger at her lies, and keep my cool. I got up from the table and walked over to the door and summoned David and Richard back into the room. I looked at both men and said, this meeting is over. With that, I walked over to the door and turned around. Kelly, I am divorcing you on the grounds of infidelity. The terms of the prenuptial agreement will be enforced. She was shocked and asked, but why, Jack? I confess my cheating, and I am begging you to forgive me and go on with our marriage. Please, Jack, please. I love you so much. Please forgive me. Kelly, you lied to me. You didn't care enough about our marriage to lay it all on the line. If you had, I am not sure I could still have stayed married to you, but you never even gave it a chance. You had it all in your own hands, and you lied. I know you cheated more than the one time with Mario, and I have the proof. I warned you that you had to tell the truth, and you don't care enough about me and our marriage to have done that. It is over. I turned back around, opened the door, and started to walk through. She screamed, "Wait, Jack! I will tell you everything. Everything you want to know, please don't leave me." I spun around once again and glared at her with all the hurt and anger I could muster and spat out, "You were warned, you had your chance and thought you could get away with only one episode, so you lied. You had your chance, Kelly." And I screamed back at her, "It is over." David hurried after me and finally caught up with me as I was getting into my car. He grabbed my arm and asked me, "Do you really want to file on the charge of infidelity?" "Yes, I do." She had her chance. Somehow I must have misjudged her all these years. I wanted her to care enough to confess everything, but she couldn't even be honest with me now. "Go ahead and file." I drove out to our house, my house now, and grabbed a beer out of the refrigerator. Actually, I grabbed two and went into my office and sat at my desk. I practically chugged down the first one, then I drank the second one more slowly as I sat and reflected on all that had happened. I had multiple copies of the video download squirreled away in safe places, but I didn't think I would even have to make that public because I had her confession. My head snapped up when I realized that I had walked out of the office without the tape. I called David quickly and said, "This is Jack. Did you pick up the tape recording of Kelly's confession before you came running after me?" "Oh," I heard him say, "No, Jack, I didn't. I rushed out after you to catch you and I completely forgot about the tape. I am so sorry, Jack. I was so careful in everything I planned, and then because I was hurt and angry all at the same time, I had screwed everything up by charging out of there without my tape. Damn. Well, David, why don't you give Richard a call and see if you can run over there and pick it up?" But my guess is that their answer will be something like this: "We thought you had everything you needed when you left, so we just erased everything. Sorry. I will be shocked if you actually are able to get it, but don't worry, even if you don't get it, because I have plenty of evidence to file for infidelity anyway." After I hung up with David, I went to the refrigerator and got another beer. Damn, how could I be so stupid? I wasn't lit up, but I was feeling no pain as I sat and watched the evening news before going off to bed. I thought I heard a vehicle come onto the yard, so I slowly pulled myself up and out of my chair and went to the back door. I walked out onto the porch and saw a dark form moments before the lights went out. Something hit me on the back of the head, and all I saw was blazing light, and then I drifted off into total darkness. Beep, beep, beep is what I heard. It didn't take me long to realize that the beeping was close beside me. I opened my eyes and tried to turn slightly to my right to see what it was, when the excruciating pain hit me full force. I thought my chest was going to explode, and the pain shot straight up into my head, creating flashes of blue and silver stars. What the hell? I thought. I heard a slight rustling nearby and felt the surge of something in my body, and I was out again. The next time I heard the beeping, I opened my eyes and looked around as best as I could without moving. I had learned my lesson from the first time. I saw a nurse sitting in the chair beside me. I tried to turn again, slowly this time, but I couldn't turn. "Hi, Jack, I am Susan, and I am your nurse. Please don't try to move, okay? Everything is going to be okay, and I will explain everything to you, but please lay still. Do you understand me?" I think something was jammed down my throat, but I was able to nod my head a little, so I nodded that yes, I understood. "Jack, I need to go tell the doctor that you have regained consciousness, and then we will be right back in here, okay?" Again, I nodded that I understood. It was finally dawning on me that I must be hurt and in the hospital, but I couldn't recall anything about how it had happened. I guessed that someone would eventually tell me, so I just lay there with my eyes closed until I heard them approaching me again. "Mr. Hagen, Jack, I am Dr. Julius. You have had several serious injuries as a result of a beating during the robbery of your home. Now that you have come around, I am very certain that you will be okay, but you had to be restrained so you wouldn't re-injure yourself by excessive movements. I am sure you felt the extreme pain when you tried to move yesterday, am I right?" I had no reason to smile, but I know a slight smile came to my face as I once again nodded my affirmative to the pain. "Yes, we should have been a bit more proactive on the restraints so you didn't have to go through that pain. I am sorry. I think we can take off the restraints now, Nurse Johnson, but Mr. Hagen, do not try to do anything on your own yet, okay? I nodded and also pointed to the tube down my throat. Yes, we can also remove the ventilator now. Nurse Johnson will do it. The restraints were removed, and the tube was removed as well. My throat was killing me, and I couldn't speak. I was given a sip of water, and after a short time, I could talk, but my voice was really crackly, and it hurt a lot, so I just whispered, "Will someone tell me what happened to me, please?" Dr. Julia said, "Jack, it is 7 a.m. and you have just regained consciousness and gotten off the ventilator. Your throat is going to hurt for a few hours at least, and we just want you to rest for now. Nurse Johnson is going to sit with you, and after you have had a chance to rest, we need to let the police know that you were able to talk. I will give you a while before we make that call so you can recover some, but you will need to talk to them, and they will be able to tell you everything that happened. I can tell you that medically you have some serious injuries, including a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and multiple contusions. You also had a punctured lung from one of your ribs that caused your lung to deflate, but EMTs got to you in time to resuscitate you, and after repairing the damage to your lung, we were able to re-inflate it. You were actually pretty lucky, Jack. If you hadn't been found quickly, you most certainly would have died. To put it bluntly, you have been beat up about as thoroughly as you could get. You were unconscious for 5 days, came to for a couple of minutes yesterday, and were out again until today. We are going to monitor you closely for a few more days, and then you will probably be free to go home." As promised, I had the rest of that day to rest with Nurse Johnson sitting close by the entire time. Anytime I moved quickly, I got pretty severe pains, so I lay pretty still. By later that afternoon, I was able to sit up, and with a great deal of assistance, I was able to use the facilities. Susan, Nurse Johnson, and I had some time to talk, and I found out that she had been about 3 years behind me in school. Her name then was Susan Fisk, and she had married Chad Johnson. They had a 3-year-old daughter, Emily. Apparently, Chad was like Kelly and had been cheating on Susan, so she divorced him. I told her what had been going on with Kelly, and of course, she was quite sympathetic. The next morning, bright and early, I was entertaining 2 police detectives, Harold Robbins and Josh Carter. I asked them to fill me in on what had happened to me before they got too far into asking questions. Detective Robbins said, "Well, apparently it is a robbery that resulted in an assault on you. We found a 2x4 on the porch alongside you, and it had your hair and blood on it. There were no fingerprints on it, so we assumed whoever wielded it had been wearing gloves. The door to your house showed no signs of forced entry, but of course, that is because you came out onto the porch and the door was already open." He continued, "When we searched the house, we discovered that a number of pictures had been removed from the walls. There was an empty strongbox in one of the desk drawers. All the file cabinets in the office had been ransacked, the drawers and closets in the bedrooms had been searched, and there were empty drawers and racks of a jewelry box in the master bedroom. We see evidence of a robbery, but of course, don't have a clue to what was actually taken." Detective Carter jumped in, "When you are able to go home, you will have to look things over and determine to the best of your ability what has been taken. The doctor told us that it might be 3 or 4 more days before you were able to go home. At that time, we will have you go over everything with us, and we will update the reports." Robbins jumped back into the lead and said, "It is time to ask some questions. What do you remember of the attack and what happened after?" "Well," I said, "not much, I am afraid. I had had a couple of beers and was watching the evening news when I heard a vehicle drive onto the yard. I got up to go see what it was about and stepped out onto the porch and saw the hint of a person, kind of in shadows or darkness, and then the lights went out. I cannot recall seeing or hearing anything else until yesterday. I am afraid I will not be much help in solving who did this." Robbins said, "I think we still need to ask you a few questions, which should help us work through this. Where was your wife when this happened?" "My wife and I are separated. We are in the process of getting a divorce, so I actually have no idea where she was at the time," I said. "Tell me, Mr. Hagen, can I call you Jack?" "Yes, of course you can. Is your divorce going amicably, or is there contention between the two of you?" I guess I would have to say it isn't going well. She is contesting the grounds that I am planning on filing under. And what grounds will those be, Jack? I am going to file on the grounds of infidelity. We have a prenuptial agreement, and her settlement is significantly less under those terms of divorce, so that is what she is contesting. Well, if I might say so, that gives her plenty of reasons to do you harm, detective, I added. I just don't believe she would do anything to hurt me. I can't believe it, I said. That's okay, he interjected. It will be something we will look at very closely, however, to do a thorough investigation. So are there any other people who might have a reason to do this to you? Do you have any business relationships that may have gone bad? Have you had any disagreements with neighbors, friends, family, or any others? No, I can't think of a thing, I replied. Okay, Jack. I know we will have to take a complete inventory of what was taken when you were able. But two things I want to ask about now. Did you have any cash in the house, perhaps in the strong-box, and how much would it have been? Also, did you have anything else in the house, including jewelry and artworks, that would have had a significant value? I'm talking about thousands of dollars of value or greater. Yes, there was some cash in the strong-box. I would say it was upwards of $8,000. I usually keep around $10,000 in cash on hand, but I know I have paid some things out of it recently, so it is probably at about $8,000. There were some nice pieces of jewelry, but maybe only a few over $11,000. There was nothing else of significant value that I can think of at the moment. I didn't tell them about the hidden safe behind the bookcase yet because firstly, the detective never mentioned it, and secondly, I was pretty certain that no one would have found it, and I wanted to keep that a secret if at all possible. Well, Jack, I think that will be it for today. If you think of anything, please don't hesitate to call me. And when you're ready to go home, let me know so we can do that inventory. If we have any other questions, we will stop by here or at your home if you're there over the next 4 days. I got progressively better over those 4 days. I had plenty of nap time most days, but some of the time I sat and talked with Susan. I had several visitors, including Wally, Amber, David, and Sam. Kelly did not come to see me, and other than Amber, none of her family came to see me either. I suppose that was understandable under the circumstances, but I would have actually welcomed a visit. Richard, Kelly's attorney, did come to see me. We had been friends for years before this whole divorce thing started, and I was glad he had come. Everyone told me how sorry they were that I had been injured and wished me well. Both Amber and Sam kissed me on the cheek before they left, and they both had tears welled up in their eyes. During those 4 days, I went through some tough moments. Even though I slept, I'm aware that I occasionally had nightmares. My heart would race when I would wake up in a panic, and I would have tears in my eyes. There were a few occasions when I woke up and wasn't sure where I was, but Susan seemed to be there all the time, reassuring me with her gentle touches and words. I know I've screamed myself awake at least once, but I can't remember any of the nightmares or the cause of the cries. Subsequently, I learned that she lived at the hospital with me even during her off-duty hours, returning home only daily to shower and change clothes. She explained to me that it was because she wanted to support me and the events of my marriage were particularly dear to her. That was greatly appreciated by me as well. I was informed that I would be being released by Dr. Julius when he stopped to see me. That pleased me, and I got ready to head out right away. Wally and Amber were waiting to take me home, so Susan actually wheeled me down to the lobby and out the door after helping me get ready. She gave me a strong hug and good luck wishes. Although I knew she truly loved me and I was grateful for her, I didn't pursue a relationship with her because everything in my life was falling apart, including my marriage and my health. I ended the conversation by telling her I would like to give her a call at a later time. I could see the mess was still there when I entered my home. Wally and Amber offered to help me straighten up, but I told them I would prefer to keep things as they were until I had had a chance to inspect everything. When I was ready, I would call them to come help me, I told them. With reluctance, they gave in and abandoned me. I entered the office and checked on the safe behind the bookcase as soon as I got there. It held everything, including certificates of deposit, some stocks and bonds, and a good deal more cash. It was clear that the safe had not been discovered, or those items would have been taken. And there was the DVD of Kelly's adultery safely stored away. I went through the rest of the office, and nothing seemed missing, save for the cash, my laptop, and a few numbered prints of Wildlife by Terry Redland. I'm sure someone looked through the bank and credit card statements, since I did notice that they seemed to be arranged on the desk. After a few weeks, the police really had no evidence linking the robbery and beating to anyone, so the investigation was proceeding slowly. I received frequent updates from detectives Robbins and Carter regarding the progress of their work, but no new leads had surfaced as of yet. They did point out that trying to track things through fences, like they do in some crimes, was fruitless because no high-value items were taken. During their most recent conversation, they both essentially said that unless some significant evidence surfaced during the investigation's early phases, it would be placed on hold. They'd questioned Kelly and me pretty seriously. In the majority of cases, I had been honest and forthright with them. I had strong feelings about one thing: Kelly wouldn't have harmed me, so why take anything that would have come from the divorce anyhow? Since nothing came of it, I assume the investigators also accepted that line of thinking. I felt my old accounts had been compromised in some way, so I opened new bank accounts and had new checks printed. Thankfully, there were no activities that I was unable to explain, but even so, I felt more secure creating the new ones. In addition to getting a new laptop, I had the office completely rearranged. I had resumed my business. When I went to pay some of the bills that had accumulated while I was away, I discovered that RSS Incorporated had sent me a bill. Something clicked in my head. RED began to stand for Remote Electronic Data Storage Solutions for the first time since the robbery. My entire yard, including the house, the grain bins, and the machine shed, was under video surveillance. The computer in my grain office, which is located near the bins and dryer, received the video feed. That feed was uploaded to our EDS each night in order to serve as a backup storage system. They kept it, and I had to pay a monthly fee that varied according to how much data they kept. To keep the fees reasonable, I would go in each month and remove the oldest data. I hadn't removed anything from the robbery period. I had a video. I instantly went to our EDS website and chose the day of the heist from the archives. To watch it, I downloaded the whole day to my laptop. I hoped the quality would be sufficient to detect the identity of the person who had assaulted and stolen from me. If it was good, I would put it on a DVD and send it to Robbins and Carter, the detectives. That would restart the investigation. I realized as I looked back over the day that there was nothing I would give the detectives, and I was now certain that they would never be able to solve the crime. After paying all of my outstanding bills, I began making plans for the remainder of my life. I made the decision to get in touch with a former college buddy of mine who was employed by Cargill, one of the biggest grain merchandisers in the United States. I made an appointment to see the high-ranking officials in their acquisition department through them. The power of human connections to bring about positive change is truly remarkable. After working through my plans with Cargill for about 2 weeks, I decided to take a quick detour to Las Vegas. I ultimately had to fly to Phoenix for some business, and after that, I drove up to Vegas to partake in a little gambling. I took off for home after 2 days and started executing all of my plans. To arrange a meeting for me with Kelly, her brothers Tom and Carl, and her sister Amber, I called David and asked him to call Gentry Grain. I informed him that he needed to bring up the fact that my grain stored there would no longer be included in the state's required grain reserves due to the upcoming divorce. David informed them that I wanted to get down and talk with them about the situation in order to find a solution. The fact that they agreed to meet with me so quickly suggests that David surprised them. I guess they hadn't considered the consequences of removing my grain from the calculation. I greeted Tom, Carl, Amber, and Kelly as soon as I entered the office. I suppose you could see why I thought it would be a good idea for us to get down and settle some differences. Tom began to speak, but I interrupted by raising my hand and saying, "I believe I called this meeting. Before you all speak, I'd like you to sit here and listen. To be really honest, I believe that if you do that, everyone will benefit. I would like to first, if you will, put this divorce behind us. I apologize for the slight, Kat. I placed the final draft of the divorce agreement on the table in front of Kelly and asked her to sign it. "Jack, I don't want to get divorced," she said. "I sincerely hope you will forgive me and work through our issues, because whatever you think I did was not worth losing all the wonderful years we shared. This is definitely not what I want to do in front of my siblings." "All right, Kelly, let's get this finished. Our marriage has no tomorrow, so the sooner you sign these documents and we can both move on with our lives, the better," I answered. "Well, if you must divorce me, I still plan on fighting the infidelity issue," she blurted out as her face turned red. "The least you can do for me is that." I was obviously prepared for it, even though I knew she would play that card. I tossed a copy of the DVD onto the table with the divorce papers and said, "If you choose to fight me on the infidelity issue, Kelly, I will have no recourse but to put this DVD into evidence before the court. In case you are wondering what it is a video of all 8, yes, I said 8, times you cheated on me at the spa." Amber shot daggers at Kelly, her face turning a brilliant red. "Kelly, you didn't. How are you able to accomplish that? You informed me that you approached them and shut them down in the same way that I did. How could you harm Jack in that way?" "Yes, Amber, that is what she did. When Stephen came up to you that first night, she gave Mario the finger. She then duped Stephen the following evening, and on your second visit, she duped Mario for 3 nights in a row. She also screwed him 3 times during this most recent visit. Yes, 8 videos of you lying to Mario and Steve should take care of my infidelity problem pretty nicely. Kelly, you better sign the damn divorce papers now, or I'm taking this to court. I've had enough playing around with you." While Kelly signed the divorce papers, Amber was sobbing quietly, and I could see that Tom and Carl were also in disbelief. I placed the remaining copies in my briefcase and gave her one. Kelly's eyes were full of unshed tears, and her face was expressionless. I couldn't tell for what, but it didn't really matter. She was obviously shocked that I had the proof of several infidelity incidents, but her shock had not yet worn off. Let's now address the other matter at hand, which is the grain issue. I'm going to make this quick, but regrettably worse, because I know you're all shocked by what I just told you. The bad news is that you will be in breach of your loan covenants and your grain license as a result of this divorce, and you will no longer have the value of my stored grain included with your reserves. The good news is that after I approached your father and made my case, he decided to sell me his 52% share in the company. Since there was no first right of refusal clause in your agreement with him, I suppose Richard wasn't the best choice for you in the purchase after all. Although I didn't provide him with proof of your infidelity, he thought I did, so to him, this was an obvious choice. I am now Gentry Grain Incorporated's major shareholder because he sold me his stock knowing that the company would fail without my equity. You all own 12% of the total, placing you in the minority with 48%. The bad news is that Cargo has agreed to purchase my majority stake in Gentry Grain through negotiations. They are constantly searching for emerging grain businesses, and Gentry Grain offers what they need at a competitive price. Fortunately, you can choose to sell your shares to them at the same price that I arranged with them. I suggest that you take that action. I got a great deal by negotiating. The bad news is that someone else now owns your business, and they will be assessing employees to determine who brings value to the organization. The good news is that each of you has a 1-year employment guarantee as part of my negotiations. I strongly advise you to bust your asses during that time to show them why you are an important employee. I just wanted to let you know that Wally and I have both sold our farms to them. Cargo has given Wally a long-term contract to manage both farms, and we all know how well he performs and will perform for them. The look of deep shock that I had noticed on each of their faces intensified into a mild fury. Among the Gentry clan, Tom was the eldest and the unofficial leader, so he spoke first. "Jack, what in hell have you done? Because my sister cheated on you, you have destroyed this family business, right? In any case, what kind of man are you? What kind of lies did you tell my father to convince him to sell you something?" "I'll tell you what, Tom," I said. "First, your father sold me his stock so that none of you, Carl or Kelly, would go to jail. You inquire about my character, but you ought to ask yourself about your own, your brother's, and your sister's qualities as a man and a woman. I threw the other DVD across the center of the table. I believe you will find all the explanations for why this is all happening in this video. It amply displays the night you beat me with your pickup in my yard. It's obvious that Carl and you beat me. It makes it quite evident that you are leaving my house with my possessions. You should count yourselves fortunate that I chose this path of retaliation rather than giving this to Detectives Robbins and Carter. At last, Kelly said, "Jack, how can you do this to me? You're a whole other story, Kelly. I feel like I've wasted my entire life with you. Although your father was always somewhat of a second-class dump farm boy, he always treated my dad fairly well. I was treated pretty much the same way by Tom and Carl, who always believed that I was too good for people like you. Although you were my closest friend, you thought you were superior to me in many aspects. You were always a cunning lover, I could tell. You slept with Larry Evendale right away, despite your promise to be exclusive with me. You were a disloyal spouse who disregarded me in our union by having affairs with those men. Keep in mind that I saw every second of that video and that I heard every word. The worst part is that you make a terrible best friend, Kelly. You know, during the attack, I nearly died. My lung deflated after being punctured by one of my broken ribs. I would have passed away if the paramedics hadn't arrived at the scene quickly enough. It's interesting to note that although Tom and Carl broke my ribs, your booted foot kicked me 3 or 4 times, breaking the rib deep into my lung. Kelly, you nearly killed the man you claim to be deeply in love with. Don't you think that would be considered being a pretty rotten friend? Kelly had passed out. Before she could fall out of her chair, Carl and Amber raced to her aid. Then, in an attempt to revive her, Amber went and got a cold cloth. Once she regained consciousness, I fired my last shot. You now understand that your father gave me his stock so that none of the 3 of you would go to jail. Except for you, Amber, he isn't particularly proud of his kids, and you will undoubtedly hear more about that in the future. As I've previously stated, Kelly, I feel like I've wasted the majority of my life on you, but I promise not to waste any more of it. Enjoy your wonderful life. I closed all deals and left the room at that point. I would move on, I was free to do so. After Kelly and I separated, I became the company's largest shareholder. After the divorce, my siblings were all arrested for attacking me. This happened a few months later. It appears that the police had received the assault video from someone. Kelly's father approached me in my office because he was angry with me. Unfortunately, he suffered a stroke shortly before I could leave the office, after he had stormed in screaming. I suppose karma works in strange ways. Please feel free to express your opinions in the space provided for comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.